Hello everyone. Today we will be discussing Schedule 1 drugs with an emphasis on marijuana. The purpose of this module will be to discuss the social and economic impact of Schedule 1 drugs. Schedule 1 drugs are defined mainly by their lack of medical approval. Schedule 1 drugs are the only drugs that are not approved by the FDA. Additionally, they are considered at high potential for abuse. So if we take a look at some other Schedule 1 drugs, we can see drugs such as psilocybin, LSD, and quaaludes. Psilocybin is the psychoactive ingredient in magic mushrooms and has been argued by some to have medicinal use. And about a day prior to recording this module, I saw that Johns Hopkins received a $17 million donation to open up a center for psychedelic and consciousness research. Next, we have lysergic acid diethylamide, which I hope I pronounced right, which is also a psychoactive drug that has been argued to have medicinal benefit. Lastly, we have methaqualone, or quaaludes as they're commonly known. This was a sedative that was legal in the U.S. for a very long time back in the 70s and 80s, and it was eventually banned back in 1985. You might know about quaaludes from The Wolf of Wall Street. The point being here that if marijuana is eventually rescheduled from Schedule 1, how long until maybe mushrooms or LSD possibly fall in line and are rescheduled as well? The next slide takes a look at the legality of marijuana throughout the United States as of September 2019. For simplicity, I will be referring to the 50 states of the United States as well as the District of Columbia. Marijuana is recreationally legal in 11 states as well as the District of Columbia. The dark green states, which there are 23 of, represent places where marijuana is medically legal. Ohio is one of these 23 states. The light green, which there are 14 of, represent medically legal states, however, they have THC limitations. THC limitations can range anywhere from Kentucky, where they only allow the sale of CBD, which is the non-psychoactive compound of marijuana, all the way up to Georgia, where they allow up to 5% THC, which is the psychoactive portion of marijuana. Lastly, there are 3 states which marijuana is prohibited. These 3 states are Idaho, South Dakota, and Nebraska. Several states have a red D on them, which means that they have decriminalized marijuana. 15 states to be exact. This is not the same as it being legal. Decriminalization simply means that possessions of small amounts of marijuana do not result in jail time. In Ohio, for example, if you are caught with anything under 100 grams, it is merely a fine. Repeat offenses are handled differently, however. So if we take a brief look into the history of marijuana in the United States, we can see that in 1850 it first appeared in the United States Pharmacopoeia. The Pharmacopoeia is essentially a census, but it's for drugs. Every year, the U.S. publishes a detailed list of various medicinal compounds that can be used for treatment. In 1937, the first law regulating the possession and sale of marijuana came out. You couldn't buy or sell marijuana without paying a transfer tax. In 1970, upon passing of the Controlled Substance Act, marijuana became federally prohibited. And it was until 1996 when California became the first state to approve medical use. The drug could be prescribed by physicians without any federal persecutions, and this started the building of the first dispensaries. Although the issue of legalizing or rescheduling marijuana may seem like a current issue, it's actually been going on for decades. Marijuana can be rescheduled either legislatively through Congress or directly through the executive branch. Since 1972, several attempts have been made to remove marijuana from its Schedule 1 ranking in the Controlled Substance Act. So far, they've all failed. The most noteworthy attempt was in 1972, when NORML, or the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, made a push to reschedule marijuana as a Schedule 2 drug, essentially challenging the medical approval aspect, which marijuana doesn't have. After 22 years, the attempt failed due to lack of scientific studies. Shortly after this failure, marijuana lobbyists gathered to challenge the other aspect of its scheduling, its high abuse potential. After 7 years, this too failed. And lastly, some interesting food for thought. The DEA considers marijuana Schedule 1, but the UN has it listed as a Schedule 4 drug. Now with context, let's take a closer look at some of the economic impact that marijuana has had on the US. As of 2016, legal marijuana sales in the US hit $6.7 billion, which is an increase of 30% to the previous year. Looking at Graph 1, we can see that legal sales of marijuana fall right in between national sales for Netflix and organic produce. Additionally, in 2016, illegal marijuana sales were an estimated $46 billion, with some estimates being as high as $80 billion. With a conservative estimation, illegal marijuana sales fall right in between video games and cigarettes. Next, let's take a look at the cultural impact that marijuana has had. Looking at Graph 2, we can see that support among marijuana is high among Democrats, white men, and ages 25 to 29. All three of these are very well-populated demographics. Additionally, if we look at Graph 3, we see that over time, the public opinion on marijuana has shifted toward a majority positive. If we link these two graphs, we could conclude that since marijuana is popular among such a populous demographic, which would be white male adults, specifically liberal adults, it would make sense that marijuana has garnered more support over the years. The economics are directly impacted by the public perception of marijuana in culture. In addition to marijuana becoming a majority supported by Americans, it is also becoming increasingly popular among physicians as a treatment. In 2013, it was reported that 76% of North American providers would vote in favor of medicinal cannabis. As cannabis has increased in popularity, so too have other ingredients located in the plant. CBD, or cannabidiol, is a compound found inside of marijuana that acts very differently than the main compound THC, which most people are familiar with. Mainly, CBD does not give you any sort of high, whereas THC does. Over time, CBD helps lessen the impact of symptoms of diseases such as Alzheimer's, seizures, anxiety, tumors, glaucoma, and arthritis. Recently, CBD's popularity has made it subject to several recent studies. 2 studies conducted in May 2019 show CBD has had a positive impact as both an antidepressant and an analgesic. So this next slide shows examples of products that use CBD and just the wide array of products that CBD is being used in. On the left, you have the Kush High Volume Mascara, which I guess there's CBD in the mascara. I don't really understand that, but you know, they're playing on the one hit for high volume and the Puff Puff brush. In the top right there, you can see that there's CBD infused ice cream from Ben & Jerry's. There's foot cream that has CBD inside, and the little pug in the corner's got a bottle of CBD oil. They make it for pets now. You could pretty much go to any pet store and get your dog CBD too. So in addition to these being hilarious, it shows that CBD and marijuana in general is popular among young adults, and there's a big push in marketing for CBD towards teens and like 20s and 30s, as seen by the products shown. An obvious issue when discussing medical marijuana is its legality. Marijuana is still illegal at a federal level. However, interpretation is left up to the states that may permit the usage of the drug medically or otherwise. In fact, it was in August of 2013 that the Department of Justice announced that it will allow states to legally regulate the production, distribution, and sale of marijuana. 1973 was the first time a state decriminalized marijuana. It was Oregon, by the way, which kicked off several other states decriminalizing throughout the mid-70s. Another decriminalization push occurred in the mid-2000s, which saw 15 states adopt new laws. As of 2019, 9 of those 20 states have full-on legalized marijuana. Since there's a lot of confusion about the legality and the state versus federal, there is a very step-oriented and specific process for acquiring medical marijuana. First off, patients will receive a referral from a physician if they feel that medical marijuana could help the condition. There's only about 15 or 20 recognized conditions that the physicians agree medical marijuana would help. The referral is taken to a state official who then has to approve that. If both approve, the physician and the state official, the patient can then go to a dispensary. As stated earlier, you would need to get a referral from a physician. So another contention that would arise among medical marijuana is convincing physicians of the validity and effectiveness as cannabis as a treatment. Although most physicians are in support of medical marijuana, going through the process of prescribing a newer, less proven medication may garner hesitance from physicians in the following ways. Research. Marijuana is relatively under-researched compared to other drugs, which results in several unknown interactions with other prescription drugs. Person-dependent results. Marijuana consumption is extremely variable and affects everyone differently. Additionally, there is still discussion regarding how much product people would take in order to relieve their symptoms. To put it simply, how many joint hits would it take for anxiety to go away? How many gummies do you need to eat for your fibromyalgia to be relieved? Unclear legality. As discussed in the previous slide, the confusing nature of federal versus state leaves physicians caught in the crossfire. Patients and state regulatory agencies say that they may use marijuana as medicine, while the government tells them if they do so, they are criminals. I would imagine some physicians don't want to deal with that headache. And lastly, there's a stigma. I don't think there's any doctor that just wants to be considered the weed doctor. Since marijuana isn't seen worldwide as a real medicine yet, it may undermine their credentials. Here in Table 4 and 5, we have data regarding prisoner drug use based off the type of drug. The top graph represents state prisoners, where the bottom represents federal prisoners. I did us all a favor and just highlighted the important parts that we need to look at. Looking at usage ever, we can see both types of prisoners have very high overall rates. Additionally, both have increased from 1997 to 2004. Interestingly enough, where state prisoner rates have risen less than 1% across the board over time, federal prisoners' rates have risen quite drastically over the same amount of time. The average rate of increase among federal prisoners is 5.5%. Table 6 shows us what drugs inmates were arrested for specifically. We can see that marijuana is by far the highest drug among state and federal prisoners. So to summarize, the medical marijuana industry is rapidly expanding due to increasing acceptance among the medical community and the accelerated rate of legalization. The federal government outlaws the substance, yet states can interpret marijuana laws independently, creating disarray among patients and physicians alike.